Welcome back to News Geelong on this Friday spring evening. The National Wool Museum is again in full flight with the exhibition of My Cup Runneth Over, Christmas decorations inspired by the famous Johnston collection, as well as craft demonstrations by the multi-talented Barbara Porter. Meryl Friend reports.
We're at the National Wool Museum where My Cup Runneth Over is one of the latest exhibitions, exquisite handmade Christmas decorations inspired by the Johnston collection.
Yeah, what happens each year is that the Johnston collection, which is a house museum in Melbourne, asks artisans from different parts of Victoria to actually come into the house, look at part of the collections that is in the house, and then to interpret that collection in an arts and craft form. So it varies in what we have here, everything from glassware through to quilting, through to crochet, through to embroidery, through to it just goes on and on and on. And I think all up there's about 8 groups that have been involved.
And so different regions are involved each year?
Yes, they are. The last Christmas was Warrnambool and surrounding areas. The prior one, as people might remember, was actually Geelong, and that was the first time we actually took this exhibition. And I think this year coming up is Albury, Wodonga and regions, and then I think following that they're actually going to do a highlights of the past 10 years.
So for people who aren't aware, the Johnston House in Melbourne?
Yeah, Johnston House in Melbourne was actually owned by a man called Robert Johnston. He actually started collecting antiques, which was inspired by his grandmother who gave him a Minton cup, and that started the whole thing. I think he was about 8 or 10 years old at the time. He went on to have this amazing collection of antiques, and he actually travelled the world buying antiques, bringing them back to Australia, and that was how he made his fortune. His house, which is called Fair Hall, he actually decorated in kind of Georgian and Regency furniture and decorations. And when he passed away, he actually said, providing you can turn this into a house museum in X amount of time, I will donate it. And he did. And it's a brilliant, brilliant institution.
From the National Wool Museum, Meryl Friend, News Geelong.
Thank you, Meryl. And viewers, a reminder that demonstrations by Barbara Porter can be seen each Tuesday until November 8 at the National Wool Museum. Members of the Geelong Chamber of Commerce continue to work with business in and around Geelong to look at ways and means of ensuring the survive and thrive operating philosophy is maintained. Meryl Friend reports.
We're here at the Fred Flanagan Room for a special breakfast with the Chamber of Commerce in conjunction with Harwood Andrews to find out some of the latest hot topics of taxes and reforms for businesses.
Each year the law undergoes significant changes, and the purpose of this breakfast was in conjunction with the Geelong Chamber of Commerce to actually provide to the Chamber's members information about those changes which had taken place. So we looked at really 4 main areas of law: workplace relations, some changes in relation to terms of trade and the way in which businesses deal with their customers, the carbon tax, which has just been introduced into Parliament in the last week or so, and finally some taxation issues. In relation to workplace relations, we didn't really focus much on the Fair Work Act type aspects, but looked more at bullying and social media, and importantly the needs for businesses to ensure they had policies and procedures in place which address those issues. In relation to the carbon tax, we just gave an overview of what the legislation says and the effect it will have on businesses, and importantly tried to stress that the tax itself really only affects about 500 businesses in Australia, but it will have an indirect effect on most businesses because of the way in which the prices which those 500 affected companies will incur will flow through to businesses, and those businesses in turn ability to flow it through onto their customers. In relation to tax, there are some important initiatives that the government introduced in respect of the 2011 tax year as late as 29th of June 2011, so in other words, one day before the end of the financial year, and the changes which businesses have to make to accommodate those things, and that particularly relate to those businesses which trade through trusts and the way in which they can distribute the income through trusts and then pay tax on that income which is distributed. And finally, in relation to businesses and their dealing with customers, there's been 2 important changes to legislation. First, the Trade Practices Act no longer exists and has been replaced by what's called the Australian Competition Law, and what that does is it makes sure that any dealings with customers, companies have to take account of unfair terms in their contracts and also provide some basic consumer guarantees. And then there is new legislation called the Personal Securities Legislation, and what that does is say to businesses that if you have in your terms of trade what's called a retention of title clause, you must register your interest in the goods. A retention of title clause clause is where a business says, if you don't pay me, I have the ability to come and take these goods back. And to date, there has been no system of registration of those provisions, but now you have to register them, or you will have to register them when the Act comes into force, which will be no later than 31st of January next year.
Legal issues for business are extremely important, and a lot of small business in particular probably doesn't really get the opportunity to really sit down and reflect on some of these things. There have been a lot of changes to legislation over the past 12 months, even the past 6 months, as has been identified today. And I think it's a bit of a minefield really for business. One of the things that I guess the Chamber is really passionate about is to reduce red tape for business, and unfortunately with so much legislation, it's just literally a minefield for business. So I think it's important that they do hear these messages and understand what some of the implications are for their businesses.
From the Fred Flanagan Room, Meryl Friend, News Geelong.
Thank you, Meryl. The annual Anglesea Music Festival is set to once again celebrate live music with a who's who of Australian bands and singers performing from October 14 through 16. Debbie Meaney reports.
This year's Anglesea Music Festival has some great lineups. I spoke with Karen Stoneham about just what's happening. There's some small grassroots competitions as well as the larger headline acts.
Oh, there's lots planned this year. We've got over 100 performers, we've got a weekend market, we've got grassroots competition, as you just said, and we've also got our workshops, which are really innovative, hands-on workshops. So lots of different things for everyone.
So songwriting and all that kind of stuff as well?
Yeah, Tiffany Eckard's doing a songwriting workshop. We've got a drum workshop, which is made out of a gas bottle, which is just truly amazing how that works. We've got Chris Wilson doing harmonica workshops, and we've got a gospel workshop happening, and ukulele.
And Joe Camilleri and the Black Sorrows, just, thrown in there?
Yeah, well, he's our headliner, but we've also got lots of great acts like Hats Fitz and Carla Robinson. I don't know if you know them, they're an international act. We've got Between the Wars is like a Celtic AC/DC on stage. They're just absolutely brilliant. We've got Dave Steele, Intoxicar, Reece Dillon the Jelly Baby, Spindrift, Stringy Bark McDowell. So lots of different acts and lots of things for everyone.
So it does cover all different ages and different tastes in music, and starts on Friday night, I'm guessing?
It starts on Friday, October the 14th through to Sunday the 16th. And it's mixed genres. So you've got your blues, you've got your roots, you've got your folk, all the different genres mixed into all the different venues, which is 6 venues and 4 fringe venues. So it's quite big this year.
If memories didn't last so long, if nobody did, nobody wrong, if we knew what we had before it was gone, if every road led back home, this would be our very last country song.
In Anglesea, this is Debbie Meaney for News Geelong.
Thank you, Debbie. This is News Geelong as we go to a break and return with sport and weather after this.